Today's discussion delves into a fascinating Supreme Court case, Diamond Alternative Energy, LLC, Idaho v. Environmental Protection Agency, et al. It centers on the Clean Air Act and California's ambitious regulations to curb greenhouse gas emissions from vehicles. The core question: do fuel producers have the legal standing to challenge these regulations?
A crucial question indeed. The case highlights the complex interplay between environmental regulations, economic impact, and the limits of judicial review.
Exactly. The lower court dismissed the fuel producers' case, arguing they couldn't demonstrate that invalidating the regulations would actually increase their fuel sales. Seems counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The argument hinges on whether the market forces driving the shift towards electric vehicles are so strong that even without the regulation, that the outcome would remain the same.
So the Supreme Court had to grapple with the question of redressability, whether a court ruling could actually fix the fuel producers' claimed injury. Let's unpack that. Let's start with the basics. What are the three elements required to establish Article 3 standing?
To have standing, a plaintiff must demonstrate injury in fact, causation, and redressability. Injury in fact means a concrete and particularized harm. Causation means the defendant's actions caused the injury. Redressability means a court ruling would likely fix the injury.
In this case, the fuel producers argued their sales were directly harmed by the California regulations, which incentivize electric vehicles. Did the court agree on injury and causation?
Yes, the Supreme Court readily accepted that the fuel producers suffered monetary injury due to decreased demand for gasoline and other liquid fuels. The causation was also clear. The regulations were designed to reduce liquid fuel consumption.
But the crux of the case was redressability. The lower court and the EPA argued that even if the regulations were overturned, automakers wouldn't significantly increase gasoline-powered vehicle production due to consumer demand for electric vehicles.
That's right. The EPA and California argued the market had fundamentally shifted, rendering the regulations essentially irrelevant. They pointed to surging consumer demand and automakers' investments in electric vehicle technology.
The Supreme Court disagreed, didn't they? What was their reasoning?
The court found this argument paradoxical. If the regulations were truly inconsequential, why were the EPA and California so vigorously defending them? The court reasoned that the regulations' very purpose was to influence the market beyond what would naturally occur.
The dissenting justices argued that the fuel producers hadn't presented sufficient evidence to prove redressability. What evidence did the majority cite?
The majority pointed to several pieces of evidence: California's own estimates of substantial gasoline demand reduction, California's statements about the regulations' critical role in emissions reduction, and statements from automakers who intervened in the case, suggesting that without the regulations, other automakers would produce more gasoline vehicles to gain a competitive edge.
So the court relied on a combination of common sense, economic principles, and the existing record evidence, rather than demanding additional expert testimony or affidavits from automakers.
Precisely. The court acknowledged that there might be exceptional cases where a market has fundamentally changed, making a regulation's invalidation irrelevant, but they found this case didn't fit that description.
The court also addressed the dynamic nature of markets and the difficulty of predicting long-term effects with certainty.
Yes, the court recognized that markets are influenced by many factors beyond a single regulation. They cautioned against assuming that invalidating an important regulation would have zero impact on a dynamic market, especially one heavily influenced by government policies.
The dissenting justices raised concerns about the court's approach to standing, suggesting inconsistencies in how it applies the doctrine to different types of plaintiffs. What was their main point?
The dissent argued that the court's decision in this case, particularly its reliance on common-sense economic inferences, contrasted sharply with its stricter approach in cases involving less powerful plaintiffs. They worried this could create a perception of bias towards well-funded corporate interests.
Justice Sotomayor's dissent focused on a factual error by the lower court regarding the timeline of the California regulations.
Yes, she argued that the lower court's misunderstanding of when the regulations expired influenced its redressability analysis. She suggested a remand to the lower court to reconsider the issue with the collected information.
And Justice Jackson's dissent went further, questioning the court's even-handed application of standing doctrine and expressing concern about the appearance of favoritism towards corporate interests.
Justice Jackson highlighted the impending mootness of the case due to the EPA's likely reconsideration of the waiver. She argued that the court should have either denied certiorari or remanded the case to the lower court.
So what are the broader implications of this Supreme Court decision?
The ruling clarifies the standard for redressability in cases where a plaintiff's injury is indirectly caused by government regulation. It emphasizes the importance of considering the regulation's intended effect and the likelihood of that effect being reversed upon invalidation. It also underscores the need for courts to avoid overly speculative assessments of market dynamics.
The case also highlights the ongoing tension between environmental regulations and economic interests. How might this decision influence future challenges to environmental regulations?
This decision could embolden future challenges to environmental regulations, particularly those with significant economic consequences. However, the court's emphasis on the need for concrete evidence of regressibility will likely continue to pose a significant hurdle for plaintiffs.
It certainly seems like this case will have lasting implications for environmental law and the balance between environmental protection and economic considerations. This discussion has been incredibly insightful. Thank you for breaking down this complex case and its implications.
My pleasure. It's a significant decision with far-reaching consequences.
That was a great discussion. This conversation is powered by Google Illuminate. Check out illuminate.google.com for more.